JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 2 Battle Tendency follows Joseph Joestar, an American in the line of ancestry of the Joestar bloodline that comprises all of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. While Jonathan Joestar was like a little good guy and kind of the classic protagonist, Joseph Joestar is a trickster, somebody that's similar to maybe Norse mythology's Loki, but he's also got this badass like American swagger and a lot of heart in his personality, and we follow him on his bizarre adventure of sexy Mayan vampires called Pillarmen, and his personal journey to connect with the Joestar bloodline and understanding who he is in this long line of inherited will. My name's Brandon, and with my wife, Lauren, we're going to casually explain this part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. But if you've never seen it before, I highly recommend giving it a watch. The first season of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure contains JoJo's Part 1 and Part 2, which are the first 2 episodes of this recap show. And all things considered, it's pretty short. It's about 20-something episodes. But we're going to explain every part of JoJo's until we get to Part 7, which is not currently covered in the anime. Our channel, The Garden Club, will be covering JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Steel Ball Run, the masterpiece of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The Garden Club will have a show called Gojo JoJo, which will cover in a discussion-based series covering 2 volumes of the manga at a time. We've actually already recorded a few episodes, but we wanted to create an explainer for this. Please enjoy JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Battle Tendency. So Joseph Joestar he's in New York City, and he gets pickpocketed by a little black boy. And the little black boy runs off his wallet, and we're following him. And the little black boy gets caught by some police officers who happen to see this happen. And they're not like trying to arrest him. They're just stealing the wallet for themselves too, and kicking his ass and being just racist pieces of garbage. And Joseph Joestar shows up, and he's like, yeah, he wasn't stealing my wallet. He was actually like helping me or something. And then they're like, whoa, blah, 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 and they're like little piggies. And they're just being disgusting and like bad. And he takes like a bottle cap from his like bottle of Coca-Cola, which is so 80s, and like uses Hammond to like shoot the bottle cap like a bullet at the cops' like faces and just busts all their teeth. And you're just like, damn, that guy's cool. So he's very different feeling from Jonathan Joestar. So that's basically our introduction for Joseph Joestar. He's supposed to be this like young 80s badass, and so then Joseph goes and has dinner with his auntie Irina, who we know from Part 1, and Speedwagon, who we also know from Part 1. And Speedwagon is researching the Pillarmen, and he kind of gives Joseph like a little warning. Eventually, Speedwagon heads back to his really important research on the vampire masks, and he finds like the Pillarmen like grave. And Speedwagon is betrayed by a Hammond user from Part 1 who was on the side of the Joestars and the Zappellis. It turns out that this guy was really basically in love with Dio from Part 1, and he was especially in love and intrigued by the immortality portion of Dio's powers, and he wanted immortality himself, so he betrays Speedwagon, murders him to get one of the masks for himself and turn himself into a vampire. And then he goes back to New York City to attack Joseph Joestar, and Joestar was like, this is weird, and he saw it coming. So basically he has a showdown with Strizo, and he like beats him in a pretty interesting fight where he like put a bunch of grenades or something on him. It was crazy. At this point he realizes he needs to figure out what happened to Speedwagon, so he heads out and tries to figure out what happened.
So they go to Mexico. We meet some like German Nazis that are studying the Pillarmen as well for weapons. One of the main characters in their group is Stroheim. And he is this wacky dude.
So Joseph is like, hey, like we should not be trying to waken the Pillarmen. They're vampires and bad. And they're like, well, we're Nazis and we're worse. We think we are worse, at least. We're going to turn them into weapons because we're Nazis. And so they wake up the Pillarmen, and the Pillarmen just take a total fucking dump on the Nazis. Right there, Joseph's watching, and he's like, I fucking told you, dumbass Nazis. And so all the Nazis get wiped out by these vampires, like Mayan vampires. But Joseph is in trouble now, and the only other Nazi I remember around left is Stroheim. And Joseph temporarily teams up with Stroheim to try to beat the vampire Mayan, and ultimately Stroheim sacrifices himself to save Joseph because he's like, Joseph, you're not a Nazi, which sucks, but you're pretty fucking cool. And Joseph's like, Stroheim, no. So Stroheim sacrifices himself, and we're like, okay, we beat that Pillarman. That was cool. And there's only one loose at this point. And yes, that didn't actually work. Stroheim kind of just sacrificed himself for almost nothing, and then Joseph ends up beating the Pillarman anyways with like some pretty nifty tricks with like the sunlight and stuff. So the other two Pillarmen wake up, and they're way more dangerous than this first guy. This first guy was the lowest guy in the totem pole, and these next two guys, they don't give a fuck about the light. Basically, they're too much. And they're so much stronger than Joseph or anybody else's capabilities at this point.
Doesn't Joseph make a pact with one of the Pillarmen too? Yeah, they don't even want to fight him, I think, because he isn't strong, so they don't really feel like he's even worthy of fighting, but they see potential in him. So they make this pact with him that he is going to like work on getting stronger. The Pillar Man takes his nose ring out and puts it into Joseph in his heart or his throat. I don't remember. One of those places inside of his body. And I think it has like 30 days before it releases poison that would like instantly kill him. That's how that whole training arc gets started. Joseph has no choice.
He kind of doesn't want to be doing any of this fight, but he literally has no choice because he talked himself into a fight just to delay his immediate death. And then he's like, ah, shit, like now I'm just going to die a little bit later. I guess I'll go learn Hammond. So ultimately, Joseph needs to go power up, have a training arc. So he goes to Rome to be trained properly in Hammond. And when he gets to Rome, he meets a familiar sounding person, Caesar Zappelli, the like grandson or like great nephew of Zappelli from part 1. This is a family member, master of Hammond. And Caesar and Joseph, they kind of quickly become best friends, but they start out with a little friendly rivalry, and they're being trained by Caesar Zappelli's master, Lisa Lisa. Lisa Lisa is very interesting. We don't really ever get to see her powers and stuff, but the way that she kind of like whips these boys into shape, you know, she's a little badass. And they're training to stop the Pillarmen from taking this like fancy red stone that is like the key to like their full power. And Lisa Lisa and the Hammond users are protecting this redstone. It's personally on Lisa Lisa.
And I just remember his training being tough as fuck. And there's these two guys that are a part of like Lisa Lisa's group that are training them too. I don't really remember too much about them.
There's not like a ton of information about them, but they're the obstacles that Caesar and Joseph have to beat in a duel to prove that they've basically completed their training, that they're now Hammond masters. So on the day that they have their like little duel scheduled with each of the two other Hammond masters to prove that they're ready, the Pillarmen show up early because they just really want that red stone. Caesar wins his match legitimately, but Joseph's match gets interrupted right at the very beginning, and the guy that Joseph is supposed to be fighting just gets one-shotted by one of the Pillarmen. So while Joseph is training, he gets this little romance with a character named Susie Q, who's like the main maid for Lisa Lisa. So the Pillarman that just killed Joseph's dueling partner fights Joseph, and Joseph ends up outsmarting him and basically winning, but the guy isn't quite finished off. These guys are really powerful and have like crazy regenerative abilities, and he sneaks into the mansion as like a blob and leeches himself onto Susie Q's back and manages to control her briefly and all this kind of stuff, and manages to steal the stone because Lisa just kind of left it out while she was taking a bath or something. Not very smart. I mean, she could have just left that on. It's not that big of a deal. So this guy steals the stone, and the Pillarmen eventually get away with the stone, but this guy that stole the stone in the first place using Susie Q, he gets finally completely defeated. But the other two Pillarmen that are left are way stronger. They take the stone, and now not only they've already failed to protect the stone, so now they got to go find the stone. So now they have to hunt the Pillarmen, who are basically still way stronger. So they track them down, and they get in a disagreement of how to handle the situation. And Caesar charges in when the rest of the group is not ready because Caesar Pelly is personally.
I don't remember what he's upset about, but what I am remembering is they go to this place in the Alps, this ski resort, and they're inside because, again, the pillar men are like kind of vampires, so they can't be out in the sun. And that's what they were disagreeing about. Either they could wait until nighttime and then have the advantage and them all be outside, bring them outside and fight, or they would be disadvantaged and go inside to where they were kind of hunkering down. And like you said, Caesar just decides to charge in rather than waiting for everyone to make a decision.
Caesar has a really, like in terms of fight choreography, he has a really close fight with the Pillarman Wamu, who's the second strongest. But Caesar drops his guard at the last moment, and even though Wamu's on the ropes, he seizes an opportunity and manages to crush Caesar with a pillar of the building. And that's it for Caesar. He's literally dead. A little bit after this happens, Joseph busts into the mansion himself trying to help Caesar, and he finds his best friend dead. And even though he just disagreed with Caesar about how to attack the Pillarmen, he's now pushed to his limits, and his only direction he can go is to take down the Pillarmen himself. So now it's basically Joseph and Lisa, and they do manage to confront the Pillarmen, and they actually come down to terms for more of a proper duel for the stone. The Pillarmen themselves come from a warrior culture, so they're like pretty stoked to do this in general, especially Wamu. So they show up and they have a duel in the middle of the night at like a coliseum. It's Joseph versus Wamu first, a grudge match, a revenge match for Caesar. And they have this and the concept of the fight is that they are having a chariot race, like they're gladiators. And so they're racing around, and it's another just amazing fight. I never knew what was going to happen. There's many twists and turns, but eventually Joseph ends up besting Wamu. And they have this very like warrior to warrior talk where Wamu's like, brother, that's pretty badass. I kind of like you, and I don't mind losing to a man like you. And Joseph's like, yeah, kind of fucking hate you, but you're all right. You're pretty tough. Wamu was like, that's amazing. I can die happy now. So Wamu like dies happy that he just lost to Joseph. It is so silly, but also really cool and badass. I loved it. So next up, hopefully to decide the entire fate of the stone, is Lisa versus the head of the Pillarmen, Cars. And unlike Wamu, Cars does not fight fairly. He'll do whatever it takes to win. He's a little scrappy guy. And Lisa is really kind of whooping his ass, but he pulls a fast trick, and now Lisa's kind of toast. I don't even remember what he does, but he tricks her and he powers up. And at this point, it is revealed that Lisa is actually Joseph Joestar's mommy, which is kind of weird because she's like been like the hot woman for like the past like 20 episodes. And it turns out that Lisa was that baby from part 1 that was saved on the ship by Irina. And Lisa was raised by the Hammond user Strizo, which is the same guy that killed Speedwagon and Joseph then killed in return after he became a vampire. Just a very weird dynamic. So now Joseph is standing down on the ground, looking up at his mommy about to fall and die, and learning the truth, he jumps up and interrupts their duel.
So, unfortunately, Cars is kind of a dickhead and decides to not fight fairly. Again, you already mentioned that, but he decides to double not fight fairly by having his vampires attack Joseph while he is recovering, which is just not cool. That is fucked up. That's a loser move, honestly. Wamu's rolling in his grave. So Joseph is getting attacked by the vampires, and then guess what? Fucking Stroheim and Speedwagon are alive and show up. And Stroheim is like kind of a cyborg now. And he has this crazy big light that I think is basically, I guess it's probably UV light. Since it's like sunlight basically, and he unleashes that on the vampires, the little vampire minions, and I think he kills all of them.
Right as they finally have cars on the rope. He takes the stone and he combines it with the power from the mask, and he becomes this like ultimate being. The sunlight comes up, and because of the red stone, he's completely unaffected. He like turns his hand into a fucking squirrel. Everybody's like, we're completely fucked. And Joseph is like, I got one final idea, dude. I got one idea. And he grabs the stone and he thinks he might be able to kill Cars if he could somehow get him into like a volcano. And he ends up flying away on a helicopter. And Cars is like, hey, I'm the super ultimate being. This guy is Joseph Joestar. He's been annoying me for so long. I'm going to go use my new power and kill him. So he just like grows some wings and flies after Joseph. Cars like shoots feathers from his wings at the plane, and then they turn into piranhas, and then they turn into octopus tentacles, and they like start taking the plane down. So Joseph appears to eject himself from the helicopter, and Cars is like, hell yeah, I'm gonna go kill him while he's parachuting down. We know Joseph at this point. That's not Joseph. It's a trick. It's like it's just a dummy in a chair or whatever. And Joseph's still actually flying the plane. So he takes this opportunity to run over Cars with the helicopter and to just drive the helicopter straight into the volcano. Obviously, Cars is trying to like escape as he's being pushed into the volcano, but it turns out that Stroheim hid himself away on the plane at the last second, even though he's like, moments from death himself. And he sacrifices himself this time for realsy to ensure that Cars goes into the volcano. And then we see Cars melt. So turns out that Cars, he didn't die. Even a volcano can't stop the ultimate thing, and he comes back and he cuts off Joseph's arm. And Cars is about to finish off Joseph, and as a reflex, Joseph holds up that red stone just as Cars is about to hit him. And when he hits the stone, it ends up causing the volcano to like fully erupt, massive eruption, and it launches them both into the sky. And ultimately, the debris pushes Cars all the way to fucking outer space, where he finally actually fully dies. But it is also announced that Joseph Joestar died as well. So everybody that we've met during part 2 that's still alive is at Joseph Joestar's funeral. And we also get somebody else showing up, somebody who has a prosthetic arm, and he's complaining that nobody picked him up from the airport. And it's Joseph Joestar. He's alive. He shows up to his own funeral, being the jackass that he's been the entire time. We love him. He basically gets together with Susie Q from their like little bond over her getting turned into like a creeper. And it's at this point, at the very end of the episode, we get Joseph Joestar as a 67-year-old man in New York City, and he's complaining that he hasn't seen his daughter since she married a Japanese man and moved to Tokyo. We also learned that 4 years earlier, a strange coffin was salvaged from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, and it was engraved with the name D-I-O, Dio, back at the present. And we also see at the same time that he's getting ready to go to Tokyo, there's a teenage delinquent who's sitting in a jail cell.
And that's part 2.
Part 2's insane.